Gigantic U.S. submarine ready to be deployed against Russia. Imagine a weapon so powerful that it can unleash destruction on a global scale, yet remain hidden from view, lurking silently beneath the waves. This is the chilling reality behind the U.S. Navy's nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarines, which roam the world's oceans, ready to unleash their deadly payload at a moment's notice. With their unknown locations and formidable firepower, these submarines are the ultimate weapon of strategic deterrence, sending a clear message to any potential enemy. Attack the U.S. with nuclear weapons and face total annihilation in a second strike. Which is ultimately bad news for Russia. Or is it? To find out more about that, you need to hold on till the end of this video. The Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, which has been a mainstay of the United States Navy forces ever since 1976, will be replaced by the submarines of the Columbia-Class, according to a recent announcement. However, in order to finish the building of the new type of ship, a significant amount of financial and human capital is required. And as a result of this, General Dynamics was recently given a contract to construct a new submarine that is valued at $5.1 million. But what kind of submarine will be replaced by the Columbia-Class submarine? Before we tell you about that, become a subscriber and never miss an update. The ballistic missile submarine of the Columbia-Class is scheduled to replace the specific Ohio sub UGM-133 Trident II, which was constructed by Lockheed Martin Space and is scheduled to begin the formal decommissioning process in 2027. When it was first announced, the project to build the ship was given two different names, the SBNX Future Follow-On Submarine Project, as well as the Ohio Replacement Submarine Project. And both of these names are still in use today. The name has been formally changed to the Columbia-Class submarine at this point. However, there is no information available at this time on whether or not the name may change once more. The building of the Columbia-Class submarines officially began in October 2020, and it is anticipated that they will formally enter service in 2031. This will represent an 11-year construction time, which is standard for modern submarines. On December 21, 2022, General Dynamics was given the contract to construct the new Columbia-Class submarine. More precisely, the contract was issued to General Dynamics Electric Boat, which is the company's section that specializes in naval support building. The total value of the contract is $5,134,324,189. Groton, Connecticut, Quonset Point, Rhode Island, and Newport News, Virginia are going to serve as the construction sites for Electric Boat General Dynamics projects. Newport News, Virginia will be the company's headquarters. If everything goes according to plan, the ships could be finished by the year 2030, which is 1 year earlier than their scheduled entry into service. There is an expectation that the ships will have a service life of 42 years. Kevin Graney, president of General Dynamics Electric Boat, had to say once the contract was finally awarded to General Dynamics Electric Boat that Electric Boat's efforts to keep the Columbia-Class production and delivery schedule on track have been bolstered due to this award. It is essential for the program to complete advanced procurement of long lead time materials and component construction. Strategic investments in the development and expansion of the submarine industrial base will help stabilize and grow the supply chain, which will ultimately increase manufacturing capacity, reduce risk, and ultimately drive timely delivery of submarines to the Navy. To cut a long story short, the $5.1 million is currently being utilized in a productive manner. What do we know regarding the submarines of the Columbia-Class? Well, join our army of subscribers and never miss a video. Now, coming back, it's interesting to learn more about the nuclear submarines of the Columbia-Class, and after looking over the specifications that are now available to us, it's not hard to understand why they came with such a hefty price tag. The size of a submarine from the Columbia-Class is enormous. It'll be around 560 feet in length and will have a displacement of approximately 21,000 tons. This will make it the largest submarine that the United States has ever constructed. The Columbia-Class submarine, which is part of the new standard for American submarines, will also feature a nuclear fuel core, which will enable it to avoid having to be refueled in the middle of its service and continue to have power for its entire life. The United States Naval Institute states that the submarine will be equipped with a water jet propeller, an extern configuration similar to the one seen on the experimental 1960 sub-USS Albacore, LAB sonar, a 6-mast sail, 16 87-inch missile tubes, which is a reduction from Ohio's 24 tubes, and a turbo-electric drive. These innovations will propel not only the submarine but also the Navy into the future. If the submarines of the Columbia-class are indeed the wave of the future, then it appears that our Navy will be in capable hands and our nation will be well defended in waters both at home and abroad. The completion of the Columbia subs and the demonstration of what they are truly capable of is something that we are looking forward to. The development of nuclear-armed ballistic missile submarines of the Columbia-class has been designated as the Department of Defense's top procurement priority for a number of years now, according to the Pentagon. The U.S. Navy is currently in the process of constructing its first Columbia-class submarine, which is scheduled to arrive at the end of this decade. This comes after years of research and development in science and technology, as well as prototypes and advanced design specifications. The elderly fleet of Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, which have operated brilliantly for decades well past their planned service life, are going to be replaced by a fleet of Columbias, which will introduce a wide range of new technology leaps forward in the area of the undersea environment. The Columbia-class submarines incorporate a wide variety of cutting-edge technologies. One of the most important of them is the installation of a brand new, low-noise electric drive propulsion system in place of the older hydraulic systems that were previously used. This means, among other things, that submarines of the Columbia-class will be significantly more difficult to detect than those of the Ohio-class and will subsequently be in a better position to carry out covert strategic deterrence operations. Electric propulsion has had a number of additional benefits, including the ability to generate more electrical power on board, which can be used to support onboard command and control, navigational systems, and the energy requirements of a number of its technological components. Navy engineers explain that a reactor plant in today's Ohio-class submarines generates heat, which in turn creates steam. After that, the steam turns turbines, which provide electricity and also propel the ship forward through reduction gears. These gears are able to transfer the high-speed energy from a turbine into the shaft RPMs that are necessary to move a boat propeller. In addition, new Columbias are being constructed with an innovative X-shaped stern that is intended to increase the submarine's mobility as well as its overall quietness. The fact that Columbias are constructed with a nuclear reactor that has a life of core means that they do not have to be dry docked for the extensive mid-life refueling procedures that other ships do, and this is a significant benefit of Columbia. The operating pace, deployability, and mission resilience are all significantly improved as a result of this, and it's because of this that the Navy intends to construct only 12 boats of the Columbia-class to replace the current fleet of 14 submarines of the Ohio-class. Another intriguing aspect of the Virginia-class attack submarines of the Block 3 variant used by the U.S. Navy is that the Block 3 variants of the Virginia-class attack submarines are being used in the development of the Columbia-class. These include the installation of a fiber optic cable that connects the sights of the periscope to command and control centers within the boat. This eliminates the requirement that submariners stand immediately below a periscope. Commanders are able to examine photos captured by periscopes from any location within the submarine, provided the cable is configured in the appropriate manner. The fly-by-wire navigational system, which was also integrated into the Columbias, was another significant improvement introduced with the Virginia-class Block 3 submarines. Hey, if you found our video entertaining, we would appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up. This is the best reward for us, and it helps more people discover our work. Additionally, if you subscribe to our channel, you'll have access to many other entertaining videos in the future.